Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the eDiscovery channel. This is Tom O'Connor coming to you from fabulous, hot, muggy. It's almost hurricane season. No, it is hurricane season, actually, in New Orleans. As always, I'm joined with Rocky Messing, Rocky, you're still in Tel Aviv, but on the verge of coming stateside.
I will be stateside later this week for a couple months, so it should be a good little visit. Yeah,
look forward to seeing
it wasn't hot and gross enough here in the desert, so I'm going to the East Coast where it's nice and cool and
Washington D.C. in August, Baltimore in July and August. What could be nicer?
Perfect.
Hey, and I should say, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it is June 6th. Which of course is D-Day, 78 years ago today. We're sitting here laughing and having fun. And on this day, 78 years ago, of course, guys were hitting the beach, the Allied troops at Normandy, and that first wave suffered 90% casualties. It must have been horrific. I can't even imagine what it was like, but I'd just like to keep them in our memories as well. And on that cheery note, we welcome our fabulous guest. How's that for a lead?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
Speaking of dying on the beach, right away set the tone for the interview. Our good friend.
What? Oh, I gotta go. Okay, I'm sorry, guys. I got something else to do here. Wow. Oh, what did I get into?
It's like we said, it was going to be nice and casual.
Yeah, it's casual. We're friendly,
Yeah.
Just a chat.
This is our good friend Ari Kaplan, who's a well-known attorney, author, legal analyst, general bon vivant. And I forget, Ari, what's the name of your company again?
I don't know. It's called Ari Kaplan Advisors.
Ari Kaplan Advisors.
Actually, this is my set. So, for example, you guys know, right? I host a lunch every day at noon Eastern. I've done it every single weekday since, basically, for the most part, every single weekday. And so, when I have the lunch, I just have a little command strip.
Wow! And what a command of technology!
Amazing, right? Yeah. So the set is constantly dynamic in this place. This is my studio.
Wow.
It's vibrant. But I'll just pop it down. Do you want to give Nexel some love? But I wanted to, I'll put back.
Hey, I was going to give you a shout out on that though, Ari. Ari's known, for his multiplicity of writing and a lot of great analysis of our space, but also he's the chair of the ASED's global advisory board, not just an advisory board. It's a global.
I mean, look, Rocky's in Tel Aviv. He's a member, and you're in New Orleans.
Yeah, I mean, when are we going to go intergalactic? That's what I want to know.
It's not Texas.
A completely different place.
It's not Texas or California, but it is.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks it's just like beignets, but it's a lot more than that.
Yeah, that's right. But also, I wanted to give a shout out to the virtual lunch. I hope that all of our listeners know about it. If you don't, you should go and check it out. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, no.
Are you on the internet? Come on.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I've even been on one of them. So.
We make fun of it now, but honestly, back in the early days of COVID, it was what kept a lot of people in our profession engaged. My sweetie Gail being one of them. I mean, she, like many of us, isolated at home, quarantined, no business. She would. Every morning, if I called her or I came over for coffee at like 10 o'clock, goes, I got to go, got to jump in the shower, get dressed.
She was
on my
best.
makeup.
I miss her.
Yeah. She, that was a major factor in keeping her in touch with people. Not just on the show itself, not just on the lunch, but those people tended to keep in touch with each other offline.
Well, it's actually become and has grown and expanded into just an extraordinary community of folks.
Yeah.
It's a gift. I feel incredibly lucky, which is why, even though we're emerging, I continue to host it every single weekday. And every single weekday, people show up, and I'm actually fascinated. I think on Friday there were 16 people on. We didn't even have a guest. And so I'm just fascinated, and we've had an incredible range of guests who've come on to tell us about their businesses, about their careers, about their organizations. I mean, I feel so lucky that it exists, and if it's given some measure of value to folks, even better. But it's just, I mean, look, we all work in isolation, just regardless of whether there's a pandemic or anything else. There are a lot of people that just work remotely. And I had always wanted to create some virtual way to have coffee with people. That's the big joke on the lunch, is that nobody ever eats. So, yeah, it was.
Ari, how do people sign up in case someone's listening?
Where do they go? What do they do?
Oh,
What's the URL?
great question. So you can just go to avirtuallunch.com. And that will avirtuallunch.com. I'm pretty sure that will take you to the virtual lunch page, or they can email me. I think that's the better way. Ari at arikaplanadvisors.com.
Awesome.
Well, what sign should I have had here? I actually have a whole.
I want to see you like flipping.
I have a whole bag of signs. I host the Ari Kaplan.
There you go. Do the Bob Dylan.
I have a podcast, Reinventing Professionals. I do jokes about my mother-in-law live. No, I'm kidding. I love her. Anyway.
Great woman.
Okay, so let's dive in.
No, that kind of segues naturally into you can tell you've done a diversity of things here, which range across the typical consulting and some of your reports on the space. Did you just have a report come out recently?
I was lucky to speak at Clock about a report that I did with Simplify, but I also a week later spoke at the Association of Legal Administrators conference about another report I had on revenue, law firm profitability that I did with SurePoint, Brighter, and Big Hand. Yeah,
those big firms have really been taking a hit, haven't they?
Well, they've just, what was interesting was that I studied the role of the chief financial officer and financial leaders in law firms and how they have really impacted innovation. That role, in many ways, like legal operations, there are a lot of corresponding roles between law firms and corporate legal departments that have been just tremendously elevated as a result of the complexity in both legal practice, whether it's in-house or at firms.
Well, let's
I'm sorry.
Back a little bit. I want to like rewind a little bit before we dive into some of the reports, and because I've got a ton of questions on that side. But let's start at the very beginning, which is a wonderful place to start. So you're an attorney first and foremost. You practiced. What drove you to the law? Like, was that something that you always wanted to do? Was it something that your mother said, Ari, you're going to be either an attorney or a doctor? And, what was the path?
You were terrible at math, so you chose the law. Yeah.
It's very funny because I was in a medical science program in high school. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and I went to a high school that had a humanities program and a specialized medical science program. I took medical science, and boy, it was hard. Like the science classes were hard, the math, and I still graduated from that program, but eventually realized that maybe the law was more interesting. I always felt an interest in kind of diplomacy, although not like the large sense of, the idea of connecting with people, of bridging ideas.
Wait a minute. You said you get interested in the law. I don't get it.
Yeah. Also, I grew up in a place, a wonderful place, but a very kind of lower middle class. I don't know how you would characterize it. Certainly different than living in a suburb of New York City now. But I grew up in the city, and there were like a handful of professional options. The law was one of them. Now it's incredible. There are so many. It seems like there are so many options. But then it just seemed like you could be an accountant, right? A lawyer. If you wanted to do something at a professional capacity,
right?
You could be a salesman of some kind, and the law seemed like an interesting option, a worthy pursuit. And
so what was your major? If you dropped out of the science thing, what was your major in college?
In college, I double majored in economics and political science, and I felt like the poli-sci major would give me a chance to study international affairs and to think about law school, and the econ would give me the foundation for doing something else if that didn't work out.
If
That
didn't
was
work
like
out,
my
right.
mindset. I was like,
Fallback,
I got to
right.
try to do both. I got to split this.
And where was
that was
that?
where
Where'd you go to college?
I went to Boston University.
Oh, BU. Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. My old stomping grounds.
Yeah. It was great. And I loved it. And I got a lot of international experience. And I think that also drove some of the interest in the law, because I spent a semester studying in the UK. I was in London for a semester. And then I spent the summer when I got home that December. I went back to school in January, and I saw a sign on one of the student boards, like a cork board, and it said "Teach English in Czechoslovakia." And so
I thought you were going to say Brooklyn.
no,
Yeah.
right. So I signed up, and I ended up the night before my last final. I got
Wow.
a random phone call from somebody that said I was a lifeguard on the beach for 6 summers in Queens. So I
Cool.
knew that I had a job, and I knew what I was going to do for the summer. And this was just in case, like an amazing opportunity if it should
Right. If it worked
somehow
out.
serendipitously work out.
Yeah.
And the night before my last final, somebody called and said, "Hi, we are students for Czechoslovakia, and we bring teachers in, and we'd like to hire you." And I thought, wow, that's great. And they said it pays $32 a week. It gives
Nice.
covers
Yep.
room and board. At the time, it was reasonable then and there, especially because they were covering my
Right,
housing and
'cause,
food.
like, once housing and food is covered, everything else is
Yeah,
super
and this
cheap,
this
so,
was the
yeah.
summer of 1992. So the
Okay.
country was not so developed or expensive at that time, and beautiful, but not the commercial center that it is now.
Right.
And so they said, but we have one restriction, and one thing you should know: we can't actually guarantee the job until you show up. Like, you have to fly to Prague.
So they weren't paying for your flights.
No, they didn't cover your flight either.
Okay.
So, and here I am. I think I was, what was I, junior in college? So I think I was 19.
So
that
21.
summer.
Oh.
No, I was 19. I
Okay.
started college
Okay.
when I was 16.
Oh wow.
So I was 19 in college that summer, the summer after my junior year. And my mom was like, my parents were like, "You can't go," like,
Right,
what are
like,
you
you crazy?
They're like, "I don't understand." So just so we understand the deal here, you have to fly to Prague to, just in case somebody's waiting for you, to give you a job that pays $32 a
Right,
week
that
in
might
a country where we
happen.
can't communicate with you, where there's no cell phones, no email, and you're just going to disappear.
You're going to
And I
go
was like,
behind the Iron Curtain.
yeah, I was
never
like,
to be heard from again.
that sounds a little extreme, but yes, that's the
Right, that's exactly what we're gonna do.
And,
Well, when you're 19.
yeah, and I paid for my ticket because I worked at the beach from the end of May until the beginning of July, and I worked for very nice people who were basically like, if this turns out to be like fake or something,
Right, we never hear from you again.
let us know, and who knows, maybe you
Can I have your car?
you can worry, right? But it did work. Somebody was waiting for me at the airport, and so I know I
Cool.
spent some time in Czechoslovakia, and then I lived in Japan for a year. So I had all this experience internationally, and I just felt like the law was a good stepping stone to.
What did you do in Japan?
I was an English teacher, so I was a work study student. I don't know if you guys were work studying in college. A work study student, basically they give you.
I barely studied in college.
If you don't have enough money to go to college, they give you, it's an incredible program that the government has, but they give you an option to get a job where the only kids who could get those jobs are eligible, who receive work study, and the government subsidizes those salaries, and it's all a whole big program. And so when I arrived at BU, they gave me a job giving out basketballs in like the gym. It was a terrible job. Like they figured, great job, paid almost nothing, but great job because you could just study. It's, you don't have to think about anything. You need a basketball here. Great.
Were you like in the cage? Like students?
Yeah, you were like behind,
open
I don't know if it was a cage. I think you were like behind a door, and there was like a half door or something.
Well, we called the equipment room the cage.
Right. So I only did that for one session because I went back to the work study office, and I said, "Do I have a choice here about the job?" And they said, "Oh yeah, there's a whole book of jobs." And I said, "How is it organized?" And they said, "It's organized by salary." And I said, "Am I eligible to apply for any of the jobs?" And they said, "Yeah." So I only flipped to the back. I was like,
Right.
why would I take this job giving out
Right,
basketballs?
exactly.
If, that was like a $4.25 an hour job. They had $7
Right,
an
that was
hour
on
job.
page 3.
Yeah. And I was just like,
72.
so I flipped and I ended up getting a job doing research in the law library, which was great for me. And the law librarian was an amazing individual. And I got that job and it was great.
Cool.
And then the next year that I guess the funding ran out or there was some other job and I ended up getting a job teaching English to adults in an intergenerational literacy program in Boston. And BU had this great partnership with the Chelsea Public Schools through the School of Education. And I was lucky to get to teach. And it was amazing because they would have the parents of these children, literacy is closely connected to reading, parents reading to their children. And in many immigrant communities, that's not possible. They're not reading English to the child. So the child doesn't develop as well. The adults don't develop. And it's a challenge. It creates a generational deficiency. And so
Same thing in Southie, by the way.
Well, and all these people, like this program was designed to address that. And they were just an extraordinary group of educators. It's been around for a long time now. And so I was lucky to be a teacher and it really changed the way I saw the world. I grew up in a diverse place. I grew up in Brooklyn, but just the interaction with these individuals and their strength and courage and hearing their stories of coming from all over the world to get here and to make a better life for their families. It was a very lucky program and it was the best paying. So like right. I always say, I think you can have your cake and eat it too.
Serendipity, yeah.
And so there's a long way of saying that was what sparked my interest in then teaching English in Czechoslovakia and then teaching in Japan. And in many ways, those lessons of engaging with different communities, with understanding what people are dealing with, the empathy associated with that, have really served as a hallmark in a lot of the work that I've done.
Yeah, it's just, I always pick up on that because Japanese was the first language that Gail spoke. She was a young girl and her dad was in Air America and they were in Laos for a while and then they were in Japan for quite a while. So she was a toddler and was picking up Japanese from being around a whole bunch of Japanese people. It was always funny because of course it withered over the years and she didn't speak it, but every now and then we'd be in a Japanese restaurant and somebody would say something, usually about her, and she understood them and she'd turn around and snap something back in Japanese, like, hey, something you can imagine Gail would say.
The other thing about this travel time was that there was really there wasn't any internet to speak of. My phone bills were outrageous. To talk to my parents when I was in Czechoslovakia, which was called Czechoslovakia at the time, I had to walk. Well, I was in several different towns in southern Bohemia and Moravia, and I'd have to walk. We'd walk to go to the payphone. Like there wasn't a payphone at the summer camp we were in, and we were in a bunch of different cities. One was on the border with Germany. It was a wonderful town. So there was a lot of.
And did you call collect?
Sometimes it would be a collect call from, I'm fine. Don't worry about me.
Don't worry.
Don't accept, but I'm fine. Don't worry about me.
Congratulations. It's a boy. Yeah.
That's right. But when I was in Japan, I had a job. I was teaching. I was on the JET program. So the government had this great program and they paid me. So I paid those bills. They were a lot. It was really, people appreciate, hundreds of dollars on international calls that were, 5 or 10 minutes long. Now it's nothing. People just take it completely for granted.
Domestic long distance was insane. Like,
crazy.
Yeah.
In the 90s, it was still $1 or something in a minute.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So then how'd you at some point then you go to law school, right?
I actually applied to law school from Japan. And
that must have been interesting.
Trying to get in on the diversity program, right?
Well, when I called one of the schools to ask about my application, they said, "Are you the kid in Japan?" So there weren't that many. There might have been other kids. I think there was one other guy in my class who was in China at the time, but there weren't many of us. So it was a good distinguishing characteristic. I went to GW Law School. And actually just this past weekend was at the GW Law 25th reunion of my class.
Cool.
Yeah. The law school has the most incredible dean, Dean Matthews. I mean, like just an incredible scholar and leader. It was really inspiring just to listen to her and her vision for the future and what students should be learning now. I was really glad I went.
I'm sure all about e-discovery, right?
It was all technology, right? Yeah.
No, but there is so much more discussion now about creating a holistic legal education. I mean, they specifically have created a program about, they've changed their legal research and writing into some more of a practical skills and professional practice type program to prepare students. And technology is clearly part of that discussion.
Right.
Well, that's good to hear. That's a great way to segue into it, using that legal skills. Yeah.
Totally.
Nice.
Not every school is doing that. So that's awesome.
Yeah. And a lot of students now have many options. The challenge, law school, I was going to say law school is great, but I didn't have a great law school experience. And I know that lots of people say they did, but it's hard. And, I felt like, I'll tell you that when I went back to campus for this reunion, I felt like all of a sudden weighed down by all of my insecurities from 25 years ago. And I just walked, I was just like, and I just walked. I'm walking.
I hope nobody calls on me. I didn't prepare.
That's right. I'm just like, it's going to be fine. And I met a 22 alum, and I said to her, I just want you to know, here's my one bit of advice. It's going to be fine. Can I just tell you, it's 25 years ago I graduated.
It's going to be okay.
It's going to be fine.
I will say though, like I walk into when my kids would have, parent teacher conferences or anything like that. And they make you, when the kids are younger, they make you come in and you sit at their desk, which is like the little desk with the little, the little chairs and whatever, right? And I'd start sweating and stressing out, being back in school, being in that chair. I'm like, no,
I left my homework at home. Oh no.
Yeah, exactly. It's like all the memory, and I was a good student, but still, it's like all of that stress comes instantly back. So I think that message is probably a really good one.
And she was studying for the bar, this young woman, and it was. Yeah. I said that'll be fine too. Like everything's gonna be.
It'll work out.
And I said, I've written several books, one of which is really targeted at junior lawyers and law students. Remember my name, I had my name tag, and I said, link in with me. And I've done that. I've had the privilege.
Rocky, what he really said is, hey, you want to buy a copy?
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
That's right. Nobody's buying it. No, but I've had the privilege of speaking at over 50 law schools now. And, I always give students my cell phone number, my email, should you have a question. And years ago, I guess every once in a while, I'd be on the phone and it would be late after hours, after classes or something. And my wife would be like, who is that? I'm like, oh, it's Joe. I met Joe at X law school and hey, Joe had a question or whatever, but they don't really do that. A lot of students have not stayed in touch with me or reached out. And I think it's a mistake. It's a mistake because I know that if they're not reaching out and staying connected to me, they're not staying connected to people who are more strongly connected to their network. And that is just a lost opportunity. And, raising teenagers, I try to encourage them to bear that in mind.
Talk to you. Yeah.
No, for me, they're not going to stay in touch with their mother for sure. She's wonderful. Me, they're just
talk to someone.
Not a chance.
Yeah, talk. Just talk.
So Ari, you go to law school. You go, then you went straight to a firm, right?
Yes.
And which firm did you go to?
So it's a marginally interesting story because I mentioned this to one of the
professors. Then don't tell it if it's only marginally interesting.
That's right.
Or at least embellish it. Come on.
Well, no. So I was actually a terrible law student, and I only talk about that when I speak at law schools because I managed to pay back my loans and not lose my home. Right. So that's the fear, and and I joke with people that I had my very first interview. What happened was So because I had this international experience, after my first year, I wasn't sure I would go back. I think a lot of first year law students who aren't in the top 10% of the class have this moment where they ask themselves, I know I'm in for a year. Should I go for all three, or should I don't know, look at investment banking or become an accountant?
Go back to Japan.
Yeah. Right. I could have stayed right. So there's got to be other ways. And I think now that may be even more of a question that people ask more commonly because there's so many more options. little bit of law school could get you all kinds of new opportunities because the legal scene, the legal tech scene, legal services is so broad and amazing. And so I remember going back and I said, the only way that this is going to work for me is if I can get a job at one of 4 places. And I have to commit to doing that. And I went for this long walk before I went back to school and made this decision. And I said, I can only work at the State Department, the FBI, the CIA, or the UN. If I couldn't get a job in one of those 4 places, then I would have failed myself. I wouldn't have then what's the value of this, right? And so I applied for these free internships. I went to law school in DC, so there were lots of amazing things happening there, which is a big reason why people want to just be there. And I encourage it. So I applied for these different internships. I didn't get anything at the CIA or the FBI, but I did get this unpaid internship at the UN, which at the Office of Foreign Missions. The State Department has an Office of Foreign Missions, and they have a residency at the UN because I needed to be in New York because I needed to live at home with my parents because I didn't have any money. And I was going to be a lifeguard. I thought I would be a lifeguard at the beach, and work there somehow, or maybe not. I don't know.
What beach,
maybe
by
get a
the way?
part-time job.
You mentioned the beach 3 or 4 times. What beach?
Reese Park, which is part of Rockaway Beach in Queens.
Rockaway.
So yeah. And anyway, so I got this, I called this woman, and she was incredible. Just couldn't be nicer, and so happy to have me. I went to GW and she had this all, I had all this international experience, and it was so exciting for me, notwithstanding the fact that it was unpaid, but great. Exactly. Like I did what I said I was going to do. And then I get a phone call from the other thing I did, I should tell you and tell people who are listening. My wife and I, my girlfriend at the time, we both did a mail merge. The career services offices said, I don't know if anybody remembers what this is, but you can get a list of names and addresses of people in certain roles, and then you merge it into Word. I think it might have been Word Perfect at the time, I don't remember. And you can create letters, just form letters that go out, and you just mail out all these letters. And so this never works. It's just completely wasteful exercise. And both of us did it, and both of us got interviews. And I couldn't believe that I got an interview. She's incredibly bright and has become a brilliant lawyer. But I'm what you see, right? What you see is what was and what is. And so, I got this interview. We were both so impressed. And I was just like, wow, I got this interview. And I was actually really excited about getting the interview. And then I get a call from the chief legal counsel in the Office of Foreign Missions at the State Department in Washington. And he said, Ari, this is so-and-so who said, it couldn't have been nicer. And it was turned out to be a wonderful mentor to me. And he said, I would love to meet you because we have a need for an intern this summer. And I said, this sounds great. And I'm really pleased that you reached out to me, but I can't be in Washington. Like I can't stay here. I have to go home. I don't have any money.
Right. I need a place to live.
Yeah. And he said, no, this is a paid position. We're offering you
now we're talking
opportunity to be an intern for the State Department over my second summer, which is like, like a dream, like from heaven. It's just like, it doesn't happen. It was incredible.
Right.
And so we met, and he couldn't have been nicer. And he's like, this will be your office, and we'll have to get you a security clearance. And it was like this whole thing. And I was like, is this real? Like, is this a real opportunity? Right. And it was great. I spent the whole summer there. And in fact, they kept me on all through my 3rd year. And in Washington, D.C. at the time, the most coveted thing that you could have was a badge hanging from a silver ball chain that you could wear around. And as soon as I got it, and especially because I was there in the fall, I would wear it to class and I'd swing it around for no reason at all. I'd like wear it. Right. I'd be in the middle of like my corporations class. And I'd be like wearing the badge. Never took it off. It was the greatest.
State Department.
That's right. It was the greatest. It was the greatest. We actually, one time, there were a group of us who were in the State Department. I think we had an orientation or something, and we were on, I think it's the 7th floor, which is where the secretary and the deputy secretary sit. Those were like the executive offices. It may not be the same now. We're talking about summer of 1996, I think. And 1996. And I saw it said, there were some very special doors, and someone was coming out, and the people were coming in and out. And we had badges, so we were not there inappropriately, and
You're
so
not trespassing.
right. So I
Right.
said to the other interns, I said, we should try to meet the Secretary of State. And
Sure.
they were like, what are you talking about? I was like, well, we're here. We're special. We're the people here for the summer. Like, this is a big deal. Like, they should probably.
You should meet me, right?
Yeah, I was like,
Right.
that's what I was like. I was like, he probably wants
to meet
me.
us.
He
Yeah,
wants
he
to
needs
meet
to
us.
meet us.
He wants to take a picture with Secretary of State and the new interns. And they were like, dude,
Post it on the Facebook.
right.
Yeah.
He's like, they're like, you're gonna get in trouble. This is not good. And I was like, I'm not. So anyway, so I see somebody come out. I was like, watch. And I walk right in. Nobody even cares. And I remember seeing on top, it said like secretary, deputy secretary, whatever. It might have been the other way around. But I thought,
What the hell?
what do you have to lose, right? So I
Yeah,
walk
no guts,
over,
no glory, right?
and there are guards, and the guard is sitting there, and he's like, yes. And I was like, I'm an intern.
And he's
like, what?
Okay.
And I was like, I work here. I was just wondering, I would love to meet the Secretary of State. I just wanted to shake hands, say hello, say I'm an intern, whatever this. And the guy's like, I'm sorry, who are you? I was like,
Yeah, what?
I'm Ari Kaplan. Then there was no sign behind me against the brick wall. So I just had to say it. And so I say it, and the guy's like,
Get out of here.
you know what? Do you have an appointment? I was like, no, intern.
No.
I'm an intern. Look at the badge. And so the guy goes back, and he comes back, and it was a while back and forth. And I'm just like, and I said, it's not gonna take long. He said, all right. So I've come back. I've decided, you can't meet the Secretary of State. In fact, you have to leave. He's like, and it was funny. I was like, oh, really? He's like, no.
How surprising, right?
It was very funny. But he said, and I still remember this. He's like, I got to tell you though, kid, you got chutzpah. It was very funny. It was like this very funny moment. And I left, and my boss was like, I mentioned the story, and he was like, let's not do that.
Yeah.
So did you ever get to meet?
It was Warren Christopher at the time. I never got to meet him. But I did.
Well,
I did.
You didn't miss anything.
The reason the story matters is because I was lucky in that the Office of Foreign Missions was responsible for serving all the embassies in Washington. And they gave out the diplomatic license plates and the tax cards. And so we would go every once in a while to an international event, an embassy event or something.
I got to say, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I got to say that's a bit disappointing, because when you say the Office of Foreign Missions, I'm thinking like James Bond. I'm thinking like, scuba suits coming out of the water at a party.
It was also the office that was responsible for diplomatic security at the time.
So you go.
It was super cool. Honestly, most of the stuff I talk about that I'm really passionate about sounds super boring. This is actually as cool as it sounds. It was just the coolest opportunity. And anyway, I met a lawyer who used to be like a very senior official in the Customs Bureau, and he was really nice, and we stayed in touch. And I asked him if I could send him my resume, because I'm going to need a job at some point. He was, said sure. And when I was about to graduate, like in the spring or something, I sent him my resume, and I said, I don't know if you would consider passing this on to your office in New York, but if he could, that would be great. And he said, sure. But I didn't think he would. And I get a letter back from the hiring partner at this boutique international trade firm in New York. And he said, we've received your resume, but we have no opportunities on file. You don't have opportunities, so we'll keep it on file. Right. And I just assumed that meant throw it in the garbage, right? Yeah. Like that's just what happens. And then when I was home for the summer, I had no job prospects. Again, I was a terrible law student. And while there may have been an opportunity to stay in Washington in this job and grow in this job, I had been dating a girl in New York, and I knew that if I wanted to keep dating this girl, I'd have to go home.
Gotta be in New York.
And that really worked out for my children, first of all, but we've been married for many years, and I feel very lucky. So anyway, I got this call right after the bar exam from this partner at this firm. And the partner said, we have an opening. Somebody left. And I was like, that was real. Like that letter was, you actually there's a file,
Right.
and you
Yeah,
have my resume in that
on
file. I was just stunned. And he said, yes, we'd like you to come in. And so I called my girlfriend, who can't believe it, who just can't believe that someone would think. It was just very funny. And I went in, and, he says, Ari, this is nice to meet you. He happened to be a GW Law alum. There's a connection. I talk to people about this all the time, not just law students. And he said, but I want to just say you have more C's on your transcript than anyone we have ever interviewed in the history of this law firm.
Wow.
And I just looked at him and I said, some of those are C pluses. And, and he was just like,
or as I like to say, almost a B.
Right. He's like,
right. It's
what?
close. It's close.
And I was just like, well, what is the answer to okay. Like, so I'm going to stun the world. Like, I don't know what to say. I was just like, what am I supposed to say?
Right.
The sarcastic, sort of quick thinker in some respect, in me at that time was just like, what should I don't know what to say here. And I ended up getting that job, and it was very lucky. Right. So that was my first job. That's how I got the job. And that man, when I started, because this is closely connected to what I do now. When I started, kind of day one, day two, he shows me the regulations that we would generally practice under, and the statutes and all these different things that related to the clients and the kind of work that we were doing. And he said, I write a column for this publication, which means we write a column for this publication.
Yeah.
And which was, honestly, it was the greatest thing anybody could have ever done for me professionally, because in a year of practice, or 14 months or something, he and I, because he allowed me to be co-author on the byline. So I was like printed, my name was printed in the paper on a bunch of articles substantively on our topic. And it was lucky. I mean, it was good for the firm because they could then put a junior person out as kind of an authority or recognized, familiar with their topics. But it was just super generous as a leader, as a mentor.
That's awesome. So sorry, Tom.
No, I'm sure you're going to ask what I was thinking. Go ahead, Iraq.
Well, I was going to ask. Mentorship is obviously a major piece of. You've mentioned it already a couple times, and we've talked about it in the past. But how do you see in general for the legal profession? Does the legal profession, in your opinion, do mentorship right, or is there something that we can do to help push that forward even more? We've had a couple guests on in the past. Some of them actually came on to specifically talk about mentorship, and especially amongst diverse candidates and young diverse lawyers coming up through the system who need to see that there's some opportunities. But in your thought process, having had an incredible mentor, it sounds like, what can be done within the industry to make that even stronger?
So my daughter, who's now 16, and I, when she was 6, we started a program called the 1 Can a Week program in our neighborhood. We asked our neighbors to put a single can of food onto their front steps on Sunday mornings. And on Sundays, we would walk around and collect those cans. And then we would, as we got, a significant amount of cans, we would take them on behalf of our neighbors to a local church pantry. There was a Red Cross food pantry. Now we're closely affiliated with the Apostles House, which is a place for women and children in Newark. Yep. And my daughter wrote an article when she was in middle school about this process, and she still does it. And actually, she's gotten increasingly involved, and it's really wonderful in terms of the food insecurity crisis that we have in this country and generally around the world. But she wrote this article, and she asked the people who had been contributing for a long period of time, why do you contribute? What is it about it? And, they said, well, you have made it very easy for us to be, closer, more supportive, more generous members of the community. For us, we're just putting a can of food on the front steps. We can afford a can of food. We'll buy a case of cans at the beginning of the month. We put 1 a week, so it's not many cans. It's not a big expense, not a big effort. You make it easy for us to give back to society, right? You little middle school child, you little elementary school child, now you wonderful high school student, you collect these, you do the hard work. And so mentorship is really about honoring your mentor. There is a responsibility of the mentee. People think that, you just wake up and you have a mentor. You have to nurture that relationship. You have to try to seek it out. You have to really let that person know what they could do to be helpful, but not ask them to be helpful. So there's a really interesting dynamic in terms of mentorship. I think a lot of people think I'm going to get a mentor and I'm going to ask that mentor to get me a job or to get me a client or to get me a new opportunity or to give me a promotion. That's not what it's about at all.
Right. About targeting something.
That's right. It's about relationships. It's about finding ways to highlight your mentor, to value your mentor, just the exposure, the understanding, the ability to learn from your mentors, what they're giving you. And you have to think about, what can I give? And I think of people at all ages and all careers and all areas don't think enough about that, people talk about gratitude, they talk about generosity, they don't know how to actually practically execute on that, other than saying thank you or feeling grateful. There are methods, and I talk about that in all my books and lots of my writings, and I try to emphasize that on my LinkedIn posts, just this idea that there are practical ways to remember. A lot of this has a lot to do with just being more thoughtful than most people, right? I mean, think about how many people send a handwritten note. It's such a basic example, but you go to things and you send somebody a gift for something and you don't get a handwritten note and you're like,
okay, right,
that's weird. Or like, you go somewhere and meet somebody. I just think that there are very subtle, small things that people generally don't do. So they especially aren't taking that with them into this mentoring relationship. Yeah. So I really think that mentorship has a lot to do with being a proactive mentee. You're the one. People want to be helpful. Over the course of my career, I've been just lucky to get help and guidance from lots of people, but I also have tried to, not just pay that forward, but return that in some way, and to highlight that, and to, think of my mentors when I need to quote somebody in an article, or if there's a speaking opportunity, or if there's some other, to make an introduction. My mentor,
right.
Now these days, right, my mentors may want to meet other individuals that they could serve in some way. Like, I think that people are not thinking about this as broadly as they should. And so the mentoring relationship kind of withers. And I think that's a challenge. I mean, my mentor is a partner at my old firm who's just, one of the most prominent and successful and remarkable lawyers in our profession. And she, we've become really, I mean, I haven't practiced at that firm in 16 years, and she's one of my closest friends. 16 years later, I think that's a powerful statement about mentoring.
Yeah. So that brings up a good point. So you've been out of the firm life for 16 years now. I'm not going to ask you why you left, but I want to know more about what was the transition like when you decided that you were leaving the firm life, and really you had the world at open to do whatever you wanted at the time. What was that transition? What were you feeling? What was your wife feeling? Was she panicked? Was she, but kind of what was happening then?
I'm happy to tell you why. I like the practice of law. I worked with nice people. I mentioned my mentor, who was the direct person that I worked with. It was a very nice team of people. They tried to find, there were times when I would be reviewing documents and I'd say to the partner who was supervising me, I'd really like to take a deposition. I know the record. I would love to. And so she would say, great, next deposition is yours. And she would literally find a deposition on the calendar and tell me that, okay, you're going to fly to, and you're going to, it was,
right.
You don't get that lucky in your career often. And then I'd say, I've taken several, I would love to argue one of these motions. I've been drafting the motions. I'd love to argue it. She said, great, next one is yours. When is it? New York County.
Right.
I see the document.
Yeah.
And I even remember my wife, I don't know if we were married at the time, but I remember her coming to watch me argue. And it was just, all of those, I feel I need leadership experience. Well, we need a team of people in this city. You're going to be the team leader. All of that stuff was just great. But I always felt like there was something more that I should be doing, something different. I can't quite describe it. And I just felt like there are windows that you can do these things. My children at the time, so 2006, my children were small and we'd just bought a home. The timing wasn't, I don't know what ideal timing would be, but my wife had started her own practice several years before. We were modest people, we lived beneath our means. It wasn't like anybody was freaking out. And frankly, if it didn't work out, I would have figured something out. I was a lawyer.
Okay.
The one thing I will say that's kind of jarring, and I think any entrepreneur, anybody that goes out on their own can appreciate this. When you have a job, you get this direct deposit. And when you're working at a big firm, after a few years, that direct deposit is great. And then it stops. Then like you don't get it anymore. There's nothing. You just wake up and you're like, oh no, it's the same as yesterday.
That's it. Right.
So that was kind of jarring. And then it got me thinking, okay, well, how do I replicate this? And I had a conversation, and I've talked to other folks who are thinking about starting their own thing, whatever that thing looks like, about this process. And I spoke to a friend of mine who's now a partner at a large firm, and he said, how much money do you need to make? Do you think it was a complicated question, because he said, how much money do you need to make to live, but also how much money do you need to make to feel like an important sense of self-worth, right? Because when you're a lawyer, especially at a big firm, you're making great money. And so in some ways that your self-worth is tied to the fact that you have this earning potential. But when you go on your own, you have to try to think, what's that number? And so we came up with a number, and he's like, oh, okay, great. How do you get to that number? Do you write, and he's like, how much can you charge for things? And I started thinking, I could write a white paper, I can write an article, I can speak somewhere. And so he said, okay, great. How many is that? 10 speaking engagements and 15 white papers? Is it 2 articles and 10 speak? We kept going back and forth. And he's like, is that reasonable? Could you possibly get hired 10 times to speak? Is there someone that could hire you to do 5 white papers? We kept going back and forth and talking about this. And a lot of this is much more accessible and manageable and practical when you can assign numbers to it, where you can say, and even more deeply, how many do you have to send out? How many calls do you have to get a result? Right. And so, my son just finished his freshman year in college. I'm super proud of him. And he wanted to get an internship this summer. And we talked about the process. And, to his credit, he reached out cold to people, and he used his LinkedIn network, and he wrote down the things that he could do really well for people. And he would tell me how many notes he was sending, and then what he got a response, whether it's negative or positive. And I said, oh, great. So you have a 20% hit rate, 25% hit rate. And I said, of those people, how many want to talk to you? How many want, and we went through this. And I said, so you see, you sent out 20 and you got 4 responses. If you send out 40, let's say you get 8. Right. And so if you were to turn that into a big number, and if those 4, at every 4, one person, and we went through this, it was a good exercise, but it was an exercise that I've done, that I often do. I host a series of dinners for corporate counsel. I do a lot of research. I basically cold calling very senior people. And I have to think to myself, right, this is going to be 200 email. Like, I try to kind of figure that out in terms of the audience. And I'm obviously contacting people respectfully, and I'm not necessarily asking them for things, right? I'm asking for their guidance in terms of the research, but I share the research. If they want to join me for dinner with other corporate counsel, that's wonderful. So
How many papers have you written over the last 16 years?
Gosh, I post almost everything on my website. So I think, and actually some of the recent ones I have put, it's got to be around 50.
Excuse me. Okay.
I think it's around 50, if not maybe a little over 50 at this point.
Cool. And have you found I can't say I've read 50 of them, but I've read a good number of the things that you put out. And they tend to be kind of wide ranging. It's not all within one specific area. Any favorites? Anything that like, when you get an opportunity to write about X, then, law firm relationships with, their top 3 clients, I don't know, whatever it is, What really brings you enjoyment there?
What's so lucky, I joke, not necessarily joke, but I have this hashtag lucky work, right? I use that hashtag all the time. I always feel like the fact that I get to do this work is just an incredible gift. And each piece that I get to do in the moment is the most important, most interesting thing then, right? I just did a piece on using algorithms in hiring, lateral hiring, new hiring in legal. There's an incredible company called Dine that's developing algorithms for this, to build equity in the profession. There's just wonderful, wonderful things. I do, an annual general counsel report. Every year that changes, and every year the participants are a little bit different. And so, a lot of them tend to connect to corporate counsel. A lot of my reports these days tend to touch on corporate counsel, focus on that area. And of course, a lot of them touch on technology, which is super interesting to me because I wrote a report, as you may recall, because when you introduced me as the keynote speaker of the ABA Tech Show in 2010, this report had just come out, but it was called The Evolution of the Legal Profession, which I had done thanks to Steve Harbour at Discover Ready at the time. And it was just fascinating to, I was lucky I interviewed David Boies and a number of other luminaries in our profession, just talking about where are we headed and what's brought us to this point and what will drive us forward. And so each one is exciting, and none of them have ever, bored me or where I've found like these.
Or not that you're going to say in public, at least.
No, but I'm genuinely passionate about these kinds of things and the people, because it's all of my research is generally qualitative. So they're based on conversations, 30, 40, 60-minute conversations with people who themselves are really interested in the work that they're doing. They're leaders in their field. It's just how lucky, right? How lucky to spend your time having conversations. Look what I'm getting to talk with you guys, right? You guys I'm so grateful to you both for serving on the ASETS Global Advisory Board and, really just focusing on the community and finding ways to empower them. I mean, during the pandemic, that was a big focus for all of us. And I think that, we did whatever we could to offer guidance and perspective to those who were just, looking for different viewpoints.
Yeah. So Tom, we're running short on time. So anything that you wanted to hit before we start closing it out?
So first of all, I'll do my Russell Brand imitation. We're not running short on time, Rocky. Time has no limit. Time is endless and infinite.
Yeah.
I couldn't resist. I just real specific, if you might, Ari. How did you get specifically into e-discovery? I mean, we talked about writing, and I mean, the transition from the big firm to your own practice to writing and speaking, but where did e-discovery come into the time frame, if you will, the timeline?
I started writing. So I mentioned this partner asked me to write with him, and we were writing about, the importation of Chinese wood or classification codes for PVC handbags. For our clients, this was critically important information. And this was, 1997 is when I graduated. Kind of 1998, I reached out. I approached this partner and I said, I've been reading a lot about this internet, and I don't know what that is. But no, really. I mean, this is total. I didn't know, but I said that seems.
No, I'm laughing because I'm a big fan of a TV show called Stranger Things. The new season just came out, and there's one of the chapters. There's a scene where the young high school kids go to this the hacker girl, and she's hacking into a computer for them. And the guy goes, "What are you doing?" She goes, "I'm looking for an IP address." And he goes, "What's that?" She goes, It's the address for everything that's on the internet. What's that?
Right.
And she goes, "Don't worry about it. It's going to be big."
Right. So I said to him, I would like to start writing about the internet. And he said,
"What's that?"
Nah, nobody. He's like, I don't have time to start. We do our thing. I have a busy practice. He was very successful. He said, but if you can somehow bill your time and write our stuff, go crazy, enjoy, write about the internet, write about technology. And so that's what started happening. I started writing about technology. It was a natural leap into writing about legal tech. And again, this is I think I wrote my first article.
Yeah, what year are we
It was-
talking?
I think my first article was about gray market goods. So it's like like a technology, IP, manufacturing, like it was like this hybrid of these topics. And then let's say 1999, 2000, I started really writing about technology. And I
Okay.
was really, I'd been writing, I wrote the cover story for Computer User several years in a row. I wrote for all these different, I wrote for Wired and eWeek. I had a column in eWeek. You know, I went to the Ziff Davis headquarters and took headshots for my column. It was super exciting. You know, I was a junior associate. I have a column in eWeek. It was just awesome.
Right.
And so and I was writing about, you know, domain name disputes or the new privacy laws or canned spam. Like they were just, it was super cool. It was just so fun. And then at some point, it just sort of gravitated much more to, I mean, I was even interviewed on CNN for digital downloading. I was a commentator for CNET Radio. Every time a big case would come down, not every time, but every once in a while a big case would come down and they'd ask me if I'd give some thought. I didn't practice in that area. Yeah. I was just like projecting. I was sort of emulating others, hoping that I would develop a brand and a place in that area. Cool. And so legal tech, which was not a thing. It was not interesting to anyone. Is only we know. Only the last several years.
Only like the 20 of us who were doing it, right?
Yeah. Everybody was interested. Everybody's now interested in it, as they should be, because it's transformative. But at that time, you know, I'm writing about case management, but I wrote a piece. I was doing a lot of work with ALM. You know, I've written for many of the ALM publications over the years, and they had often asked, I would pitch them ideas and they would, you know, and they had reached out to me, I think, to write about a bunch of e-discovery vendors and to kind of give a lay of the landscape in some respect.
I see.
So I'm trying to think of like how it really got started. And this is before the amendments in 2006. So
it gave you an intro to.
Yeah, it was just easy to, and of course I hadn't even started doing my research yet. So I interviewed people and I was active kind of at Legal Tech, the conference in New York, which it was then called. But it was, you know, just sort of, it was a very gradual, incremental change.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
Okay. So let's get a little insight into the mind of Ari Kaplan here.
This will be quick.
Yeah. Okay, let's start out. First of all, are you more productive in morning or night?
Oh goodness. I'm kind of productive in the early morning and then late evening, but I'd say more productive in the morning, I guess.
In the mornings. Because I do know that you love to do your morning runs, which
I run with my wife.
Ever join you at. So.
Yes. I swim 2 days a week also. So
good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you've been to a number of international destinations. If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
What a good question. I think I'd like to live in Portugal. I went to Portugal with my wife and we just loved it. We thought it was great. It was accessible. I'm actually thinking of this because I think at some point I would, since I work remotely anyway, that I would teach at a university somewhere and do my consulting work, but from Lisbon or some other location.
I have a good friend who you probably know him also, but won't mention. But he just did like 6 weeks in the countryside of Italy because why not?
Right.
He's fully remote and spent the mornings going to museums with his wife and going on long walks and then worked American hours. So
I don't know if either of you remember Dick Robbins, who was my mentor in this space. He was the first head of the ABA Legal Technology Resource Center, then went off on his own. But anyways, he did the same thing, Rocky. He used to spend 3 weeks every year in the north of Italy, just walking around the countryside and staying at.
Although I will say, I love living here too. Like there are a lot of places here that I would be happy to live in. And, I feel like if my wife's with me, wherever it is, I think that would be
You'll
great.
Be happy.
Yeah.
Good.
Watching? Is she watching this?
Yeah, she's never gonna watch this. So I don't even get any credit. She's never ever going to watch this.
Right. Favorite book?
Oh my gosh, The Count of Monte Cristo.
Oh,
Great book.
Interesting.
I love that book. It's funny. I gave it to my son when he left for college. I was like, got to read this book. I don't think he read it, but I don't even need to think about it. That was such a great book.
Awesome. Okay. Favorite movie to quote? Not your favorite movie, but what's your favorite movie to quote?
A Few Good Men. Come on. I'm like, why does he hate Lieutenant Weinberg? What is it about Weinberg? He seemed like such a nice guy. He's just there to help. But he's got you, Lieutenant Weinberg. Why? I can never figure that out.
And last one. And this could be interesting with all the places that you've been. What's the weirdest thing that you've ever eaten?
Oh gosh. I'll just leave you with this, that when I lived in Japan, it was 1993 to 1994. That sushi wasn't popular when I was a kid. When I was growing up, there weren't sushi restaurants. But whenever I went out with my fellow teachers or other people in Japan, they would find the strangest things and just say, just like one. And you know what? I ate everything. I ate every single thing they put in front of me. And some of it was weird, but it was just the other thing I will say is that at a baseball game, I'm a big baseball fan, big Mets fan. And in Japan at the time, at least, I remember I'd go see the Hanshin Tigers and they had squid on a stick. Japanese baseball games. It's a totally different experience. My son and I have visited, I think 11, he may know the right number, ballparks. None of them have sold squid on a stick, but I would love to take him to a Japanese. That's like a dream of mine, to take my son and my whole family, but my son especially because he's a big baseball fan, to a Japanese baseball game, because the experience, while the same game, is a different. Totally it was different. At least for me at that time. I haven't been back since 1994, but I would say that some of the stuff I ate in Japan was.
Did they sell hot dogs?
I don't remember, and I don't remember.
Okay, so if you want a really good baseball experience, this is like a mission. And is your son into baseball too?
Huge, yes.
So if you want to get great baseball food, you need to travel around and go to AA baseball parks, which are really great community parks that have all the local food wherever they are, and also have amazingly good baseball. AAA is really just the big leagues. It's just as bad or as good as the big leagues now. AA is really the developmental league.
Developmental, and they care more.
And they care more about it, but they are really rooted in the communities that they're in. And it's just a smorgasbord of local food going to AA ballparks. Yeah.
Okay, Tom, the floor is yours.
Oh, well, first of all, you forgot one. Rocky always asks the question, so I'll do it. Beatles or Stones?
Beatles. My son asked me we were talking about concerts. He just went to the Coldplay concert and he asked me about what concerts. And I'd said, I've been to, outdoor stadium, Bon Jovi, the Stones, the Who. And he's like, did you ever see the Beatles? And I was like, no, I've never, and it was just got me thinking. I'm going
to go see Paul McCartney on Sunday.
I heard Ringo Starr is touring. He's like a Ringo.
Yeah. So here's what's interesting.
The All-Star Band.
I'm going to go see Sir Paul at Oriole Park in Baltimore on Sunday this week.
Nice.
Ringo is playing in DC on Saturday and in Baltimore on Wednesday. So he's living in the area. So I am holding on to hope that we
might come out for a little special appearance
during the McCartney show. Otherwise, I'll go see Ringo also on Wednesday night. But that's my Beatles week is next week.
Well, both of them give fabulous shows. You miss nothing by not seeing the Beatles live. They were terrible performers. They didn't like it. George in particular hated live performance. Hated it. I think if you saw that Beatles, the new
documentary,
it was really. He didn't even want to go up on the roof and play with the guys. It was like he just hated playing live. It's very, very odd. But
he was talented.
So, Ari, thankfully for you, I'm sure you'll sigh a big sigh of relief. The last question, the denouement, if you will. If you could spend a day with anybody from our profession, and they can be alive or deceased, who would it be? And what would you do? It doesn't have to be work related. Would you go to a ball game? Would you go eat sushi? What would you do with whoever you name?
Since you said they could be anyone, it would be Browning Marine. I mean, I know he was a dear friend of both of you, but I thought so highly of him, and he was so kind to me when I was a very junior professional, and I'll always be grateful to that. And it would be nice to catch up. I think that he would appreciate the work that I'm doing, and I think that he would really appreciate how the profession has grown into what he had projected it would be.
That's true. That is very
What would
true.
you do with them? Would you just hang out and chat?
Well, parasailing. I mean, what are we going to do? We're going to have lunch and we're going to chit chat.
And you might be interested to know this show, if you will, is an outgrowth of something that Browning and I started years ago. When he was living in San Diego, he lived outside the city. It was about an hour commute, and on his commute in, he would call people and just have discussions. And he and I had hit it off because we were both from the Boston area, and had a common interest in Bob and Ray, the two and only. And he would
click and clack.
Right? There you go.
Yeah.
Same thing. And he and I would start these discussions and just talk about everything under the sun except the law. And he, at one point he said, we really ought to record these. This is kind of fun. And so we started doing a real old time podcast, and then later on started putting them on video. And then after several iterations after he passed, Rocky and I settled on this format. So Browning is essentially at the heart of what we're doing here. So yeah, I miss him too. Great guy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great guy.
And
All right.
But I think the point you make in terms of that, he always, like, you met him as a junior attorney, I met him as a junior technologist. I mean, and he didn't care. He listened to you. He made you feel important. He was there to answer any question that you might have about anything that he could help with. He was more than willing. And again, getting back to the earlier conversation about, like, people are more than willing to help. You just need to be able to focus and on what you need help and ask the right questions. So
he was always a gentleman, except for that one rare error. He was on a panel once and somebody said something really stupid, somebody he didn't particularly like. And he turned to the side, but he didn't realize how sensitive the mics were. And he said, "Often wrong, but never uncertain." He was a great guy.
Yeah.
Well, Ari, thanks so much for joining us. This has been wonderful.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I hope to be able to see you in person again soon. If you do make it to ILTA, that's my next, hopefully, live appearance. Rocky and I may be hanging out together in the lobby.
In the lobby.
Yeah, being rebels without a cause, or rebels with a cause, I suppose.
Yeah, we'll record a interview or two.
I think that's going to be our hook, is we got to get some people and do some interviews at ILTA. Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully we'll see you there. And if not, good luck. What you got planned for the summer? Anything exciting?
We're planning a trip to Morocco.
Oh, nice.
Sweet.
Nice. Great. Well,
fingers crossed.
Yeah.
I think it'll go well.
Have fun. Have fun.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate it. I appreciate what you guys are doing. So thank you.
Thanks for being here, and keep that virtual lunch going. Love it. Thanks to everybody for listening in. We'll see you next time on the eDiscovery channel.